But anyway, never mind. I've just read. But the essence of the story has to do with something very simple that the writer realizes in the New Testament. Raising up, he has John saying, you were not raising up seed unto your brother. That's not what John was complaining about. Anyway, another day, another chapter, a different course. In this story, that's what the issue is. And Onan doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to try. He said, I'm not going to do anything for my brother. And Yahweh was offended by that, so he brought about his death too. Then Judah says, oh, notice here, Onan, in very graphic fashion, line 9, spills his seed on the ground. That's where we get the idea of onanism from. We call onanism, it's what I guess Catholics call rhythm. It's withdrawing without putting any sort of fertile situation into the situation. So that's where we get that idea from, and it's called onanism, and that's offensive to Yahweh according to this story. So go home to your father or widow, Judah says to Tamar's daughter-in-law, because, you know, he's not going to give her any more sons to kill. By this time, she's seen as a wife killer. But then, Judah's wife died, and he needed comforting. All these men got plenty of things around to comfort them, it looks like, in those days. I don't see any comfort around for people in my day, but back then there was plenty of comfort apparently. There's some shearing going on. He's sweating or whatever, and he saw a woman, I guess it was. Her face was veiled. And they make an agreement, and that's the rest of the story here. And so then he hears that his daughter-in-law has been loose playing, sexually incontinent 24, and she was pregnant. So he was really upset. He was going to burn her, according to this story. This is a pretty wild story. And then she shows him the seals, and she knew that it was he who had made her pregnant. That comes from not giving her to my son Shelah, my third son, to wife. But he didn't have any more relations with her. She had twins, the usual story. The twins are struggling in the room, just like Jacob and Esau. Again, the red is in the story, the red thread. But this story, too, is incomplete. You see, there must have been another cycle of stories. We have Reuben on the couch. That's incomplete. In this one, look, I'm going to call the first Perez because that means breach. And I'm going to call the second Zerah. We've had that name earlier in the Esau genealogies. Because it has to do with a scarlet thread, I think. In any case, because he was the first one born, I think. And she put a scarlet thread on his hand. End story. No more. That's it. We never hear about these people again. So that's what I'm saying. There must have been more to this. You can't end a story there and not tell more. Not a normal storytelling. So this is because the editors only have this much. Anyway, spliced it in here. Let's go back to Joseph. Famous story. Yahweh was with Joseph. We get the end of the one storyline. He goes down to Egypt. So one storyline has the Reubenites and the Midianites, and that's the Elohist, where the oldest Israelite tribe representative, Reuben, is the hero, or tries to be the hero. The other is Judah, doesn't want to kill him. That's the Judah story, and that has the Ishmaelites. I think you can remember that. I may ask you to analyze stories like that, or the Noah story on a test. And then you'll discuss some of these points, which I think you could do. So Yahweh was with Joseph. We have, again, looks like it's Yahweh's story, and we have this wonderful story of Potiphar's wife trying to seduce Joseph, more sexual stories from the always. And he was working for this fellow's household called Potiphar. This is in the Quran. I like to use this verse to show the Muslim students how Muhammad is working off Old Testament material. They say he couldn't read or write. Maybe he couldn't because he's not working it from a written fashion. It's clearly either from someone told him the story, read him the story, and he's not remembering it very, very well, and he makes glaring errors, but he also gets some of it more or less the way it is here, and he adds his own bits to it. And Muslims don't like hearing this, of course. And they don't read the other people's older version of it by 2,000 years, or 1,000 anyway, than theirs. And they get very upset. But we don't like to pull our punches for any different group, so we explain to them what the problems are in Muhammad's presentation of this story. Muhammad likes this story a lot, but he doesn't know the name of the Pharaoh's official. He called it, and she who bought him, that's all he knows. He doesn't know it's Potiphar. Things like that he doesn't know, he can't remember. He just knows she who bought him. And then he has all kinds of extras that he adds on, that she made in advance, and Joseph ran out and she grabbed his tunic, and then someone said, well, see, if it's ripped from the back, then she's at fault. If it's ripped from the front, then he's at fault. And all kinds of clever little anecdotes are added to Muhammad's version of the story. And in doing so, he loses the plot line, because the plot line of the story basically is, for the Yahwist anyway, what's Joseph supposed to do? He's got to get to prison. Why has he got to get to prison? Because he's got to save his people. And the only way he can save his people is to go to prison, meet people from Pharaoh's court in prison, rise through meeting them and being able to interpret their dreams, which was the original motif of the Joseph story from the beginning, interprets the dreams, gets known to Pharaoh that he's a pretty good interpreter of dreams, gets into Pharaoh's entourage. It's quite easily understandable that would happen even today. Some bright young man from Harvard would get into the president's and ultimately get to be a Supreme Court justice. That's how you get someplace. You get to know the president, and pretty soon you're this woman now, this newest one, another buddy of the president, and is going on to be a Supreme Court justice, even though she's never even been a judge. Anyway, that's how things work. And so it's easy to rise up. But that other one, the one who's going to be the Supreme Court, head of the Supreme Court, he was just fairly young. He just made all the right moves. He moved up the totem pole.